Rochelle, thank you very much for being here. You grew up in some part of your life in Kalyan with a K,
Yes.
right? So tell us about how and when living in Kalyan perhaps or in Bombay, the inspiration to become a writer started with you.
Okay. So yes, so Kalyan with a K, Kalyan. It's a satellite town. I don't know how many of you know of Kalyan or heard of it. It's a satellite town to Bombay, and it was not too far from Bombay, but not too close either. So there is this aspirational small town girl in me always. Okay, and thankfully, because I can understand all other small town aspirations because of being born and brought up in Kalyan. In this book, however, the DeCosta family, this one, this is my Kalyan family, of course, exaggerated, completely deceitfully changed, and completely not that family, finally. But it comes from Kalyan, and I changed the name to Callian, the way the British, thought of Callian. And a lot of my family members still call it Callian. They don't call it Kalyan, because that's a Marathi way of saying it. It's Callian. So I think I was not much of a reader, or like, I can't say that I was a loner for whom books were the best friends, because I did have one best friend every year. But I think for me, people were my books. So I didn't read as much of books. Of course, I would win some prizes in annually for oration, elocutions, grades. But I would read people. They were my books, and the best library I had was my family, the Santos Fernandes family. And there's a relative here, Dr. Terence. Thank you for coming. And so I would read my family because that was the biggest library, and each person was a book, a never-ending book. And I always wanted to, I think even then I used to dream, which much later I started in retrospect asking myself, hey, how did you become a writer if you didn't read so much then? I read now. But how did you become? And I realized, no, I was always wondering, where did these people come from? Where are they going to? What did they say which is contrasting to what they do? Why did they say this and not that? Small anecdotes. And I didn't know I stored so much. I seriously didn't know. I think there's a family story in each one of us. At least one family story, if not many. And this was my family story because I had a large Goan Catholic family in Kalyan. And it was a very nutty, mischievous, crazy kind of family. And I think I instilled and inculcated a lot of happiness from that family, because there were so many uncles and aunties and cousins and relatives. And every year you went on a gathering, like let's say from Kalyan to Goa was always the pilgrimage, okay, that the Kalyankars made. So, those trains which stopped at Miraj, break journeys at Miraj. And my poem Gathering has that, of my big family, where it starts with, my uncle had a strange habit of gathering people, not less than 25 he would take on an outing. And then it starts with a catalogue of all the family members. But this was the library that I had, and I didn't know that they were inside me, but I think that's what happens with writers, poets, artists. You inhale the world, you archive it, and then something happens to you in a very chemical reaction sort of way, and then you exhale it in a different way. And that's how this story came about. But lots of other stories, like my Bombay stories, came from inhaling Bombay as a city, Mumbai as a city. So I think it's the inhalation and exhalation process.
It's interesting that you spoke about your family as influence for your characters, because that's something that I wanted to ask you about a little later in the discussion, when we get to it, and the book specifically. But a little bit focusing on your writing journey as a writer itself. Whilst you may have said that you didn't necessarily read too much earlier in your life, but now you read. But in terms of other writers, who have been your strongest influences in terms of how your own writing has developed over the period?
Yeah, so I think I came to be a writer quite late. As in, I was in the corporate world, and I was in this little box of monthly deliverables and deadlines. I didn't have a worldview. So until I was in the corporate world in my late 20s, I was still not a reader. And I think Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things kind of shook it up for me, because I was not from the literature background, I was from the commerce background, so I was like, why is this so nuanced? And how can some story be so nuanced? What is this called? And I realized it is literary fiction. And it started from there, actually, to understand that there are different genres of, because I used to read the Sidney Sheldons and the pulp and action, and otherwise nothing. I used to read people, always read people. I think if nothing, I would have been a very professional gossiper. If the archetype still existed today, it doesn't. You become the artist, but you're channeling the same details, you're channeling the same what-ifs, you're channeling the same alchemy, where you're like, I think this person did that. And I do have the gossiper as an italicized stanza on the right indent of lots of my poems. Where, like, let's say I'm talking of the poems Harry Mendonça, and I'm presenting an obituary of Harry Mendonça in a funny way of the catalogue of brands he consumed in his lifetime. Then on one side, the mono is going to talk about the brands he consumed, and on the other hand, the gossipers will talk of his sex life. And the gossiper's always there. So I'm wondering, where did she come from?
Yeah, since you mentioned this this mixture of forms that you write in, I was wondering, how do you kind of manage the whole writing process when you have, say, multiple projects? You've got poetry happening, you perhaps are working on a book, you perhaps are working on a screenplay. How do you switch between working on each one of them, and how do you process each individual writing demands that each one of them makes on you?
So, I thought a lot about this because I write in haiku. I also teach haiku at the Himalayan Writing Retreat. But I thought about it this way, that I think these genres are something that are on the top for the marketing part of the world. Like bookshelves will have fiction on one side and poetry on one side and plays on one side. But I think in your mind it's an aquifer. Everything is like groundwater. There is no boundaries, and there's no partitions of any kind. An idea could just be plucked from its thematic spectrum. So let's say I'm curious about female sexuality all the time. It could be a haiku, okay? And if it's a bigger piece, it could be a flash fiction or a short story. If there's more to explore, that becomes a web series, or it becomes a novel if there's a lot of interiority and inner dialogue and drama. It could be a feature length if it's just not as long as a web series. So I think the idea comes with its DNA of how long it wants to be with its twists and turns, but the same thematic spectrum. So you're exploring the same themes again and again, and I feel at one point you return to certain themes because those are the leitmotifs, and they are the unresolved part of you. So when I return to war, violence, and love, I realize these are the themes that I will always return to, in some combination or the other. So I don't think it's separate. The mind doesn't work like that. The mind is more like a subconscious, ocean. It's only when you fish it out on the top, you give it a form, you give it a genre, and then you bow down to the submission guidelines of some medium.
True. Yeah. So what you're basically saying is that your inspiration could evolve into a poem, a book, or a screenplay based on how much you delve on it. How much you work on it.
Yes.
It need not necessarily constrained by its end form immediately itself.
No.
In terms of inspiration.
And of course, there's a little difference in the way a poem is written. Like a poem is written in a flash, like a lightning bolt. It attacks you, like almost like I think sometimes a wild animal, or you pick the scent, okay, of or like you're hunting in the wilderness. It's just one line, and then you pull that line, and then it just happens. You don't have time to outline, think, question. A poem doesn't give you that space. But definitely the outlining happens when you are a novelist. You get time from chapter to chapter, depending on how much you want to outline. Much more time as a screenplay writer. You have that amount of space, a preamble. But you don't have that. So that can differ. How you execute it will differ. But the idea...
Got it. Yeah. So I guess it works differently for different people.
Yes,
and for you, this is what it works. And maybe it doesn't necessarily work for other writers.
No. Everyone has their own techniques.
Exactly.
I'm sure you would have your own.
Perhaps, yes. So let's switch to the book itself specifically, right?
Yeah.
If I or somebody else was to ask you to describe the DaCosta family in one word, would you be able to do it?
I can. Chaos.
Okay. I thought of how I would answer it, and I can't find one single word because it has everything that a popular Bollywood film would have, right? It's got sex, it's got drama, it's got murder, it's got chaos, it's got robbery. It just like
So it's
one
life.
pot boiler
It's life.
after another. It's
That's
life.
life.
Yeah, exactly. So it obviously very similar in terms of the influence perhaps of being close to Bombay and therefore Bollywood cannot be completely avoided in how one reads this book, right? Because I mean, if one were to kind of even draw parallels to a lot of popular Bollywood cinemas, they can definitely see parallels of what you've written in book form in more popular cinema, perhaps.
Yeah. No, I'll tell you something. That's a very interesting point and very good observation. But I'll tell you something. When you so many things actually. When I became a screenwriter, I learned about the Navarasas more. Okay, and the Navarasas took me to the Hasya Rasa, the comedic rasa, and I questioned the use of rasas in my other forms then, because when I would write poetry, they were feministic. Yes, people said that it was sober, somber, maybe angry, maybe serious, but it was not humorous. And I loved when poetry becomes witty, when you chuckle, right? I mean, Manohar Shetty sometimes does that. Eunice D'Souza did that with the last lines of her poem Idyll, when Goa was Goa, and the last line says, even the snakes bit only to break the monotony. And she tells you how laid back Goa was, that even the snakes bit only to break the monotony. And you chuckle, and you're like, where's that chuckle? Because you need the Navarasas for poetry as well. And that made me go back to Harry Mendonça. When I wrote some poems then, questioning the Hasya Rasa, I reached Harry Mendonça and the Gossipers and the catalogue of brands, because we are all a catalogue of brand consumptions. We've consumed these many brands and that's who we are. And I think that was one thing. When I came back, I wondered why not black comedy in fiction? And why am I only restricting myself to very serious kind of literary fiction, or I don't know, even thrillers may be serious, I don't know. But where is the black comedy? Because this book, I was trying to get it out of my system as my family novel for the longest time. And it wasn't willing to come out as a multi-generational story about a mother-in-law, her 3 daughter-in-laws. It wasn't willing to come out like that. And I asked this story, as you know, we are mad people. We talk to this entity called the story. We talk to an entity called the idea. So I was like, why aren't you coming out? I want to write some other books, other stories. Why aren't you coming out? And that said, I don't want to come out this serious. And I was like, why not? And then I realized, while I was reflecting deeply, that because my family was so nutty, it was so crazy, it was not serious, it was always laughing. So why would the book be serious and tragic? Of course there's tragedy, but it was a nutty family, so it wants to come out in this nutty way, and I was like, let's do that. Then of course, Hasya Rasa happened, black comedy happened, caricature happened. Not stereotype, but caricature, because you know this family so well, that you know its absurdities, its traits, its madness, its craziness, and you're like, okay, now I'm going to have so much fun with this. And then you're like, not Bollywood happens, but screenwriting happens. So screenwriting happens in the way like, what can I do with this material? How mad can I go? And I'm telling you one thing, readers came later, readers to this book came later, so I didn't know about proof of concept for the longest time, but I can tell you this much, that I chuckled my head off writing the book.
So did I, while reading it, yeah.
And there's somebody who said, this is so irreverent. And I take it as a compliment, because rarely can you write something irreverent without thinking twice, because you self-censor, or you're worried, okay, I did this, am I offending this person, or will that happen? But here it was like, no holds bar, let's have fun. It's not my family story, it's the characters taken from there and distorted and made into something. Of course, I belong to a house of landlords and landladies. So definitely the Burgundy house here is my house in Callian. And I'm not going to name it because it's going into redevelopment. I don't want trouble. But there is definitely the bungalow and the plot in the middle, which may go into redevelopment, and the tenants. So that structure, visual structure stayed. And then I had a lot of fun.
Fantastic. So, I was going to ask you, how close was the family characters that you based the characters in this book on? And you did mention that they're influenced by them, but they're not necessarily them. Because then if they're not necessarily them, it's always very tricky as a writer to write with the honesty and freedom that you have. Because obviously you don't necessarily want to hurt somebody, piss off somebody, upset somebody for whatever reason.
I think it would have been a very boring book had it been closer to reality and a literary fiction piece, as I said, of a mother-in-law and 3 daughter-in-laws, one of them being my mother. It was going to become a dead boring piece. I would yawn. I don't think I would go past the first page. It's interesting only because it's not them. It's the structure taken from, let's say, the visual aspects of class. And when did I realize about class? When I came to Bombay, I realized about the square footage of space and how much you care for how small or big the houses are. I telescoped that to my small town and was like, hey, we had sprawling spaces. And what does home mean? What does roots mean? Those kinds of things. But no, this is totally actually tangentially taken from them. It's an interesting book only because it's not real.
Completely, and it is so bizarre in terms of its attempt to be grand, and of course all of the characters are so wonderfully colorful. But I
can't say with guarantee that a family member, if they were to read it, will not find something and say, hey, you know what, that was that, no? They might do that.
Fair enough. As long as they're not offended, hopefully. But I also sense there are hints of solitude, especially among the women characters. The need for the women characters to find a voice in a very patriarchal society. Their struggles with dealing with patriarchy in some sense. There are hints of it for sure. Yes. Although I wouldn't say that they've been crafted with a very feminist perspective, because their evolution as characters, especially some of the stronger women characters, including Rita and Apollina and
Blanca, maybe.
Blanca and Annette. Annette.
How nice. Thank you for helping us. She's reading it.
So all of them are strong in terms of how they've been portrayed and evolved. But a lot of that strength comes from them coming from an evolution where the male patriarchy is very, very evident. In the case of Apollina itself, right? And she's chosen to be who she is largely because of the standardized way in terms of how society and therefore men in some manner perceive how a woman should be, and she isn't that typical woman, and therefore she evolves into completely different characters in opposition to perhaps what the male members of a family are expecting her to be. So her evolution is based on a male patriarchy perspective, but it is not independent in that manner. So it's definitely not strongly feminist in that voice, but it still has that evolution of strong feminine character. So was this intentionally done? Because you did mention that female sexuality is something that you work with. So is this consciously in your process, in how you think about the characters and how they evolve for you?
So first and foremost, thank you for that feminist question from a feminist heart. But you see, there are so many women in this novel, and there are so many men, and it's always interesting to study the dynamics of men and women if they are in one home, because that becomes a contained location, and you also locate them through the hierarchy of the family, and then you can study them better, or you know them better. It's not a big town. And of course I have in an overview always been interested about male-female dynamics, or even gender, let's say not just sex but gender. And it was easy to study this in this house because I was not, choreographing the story as much as discovering it. So it wasn't like I was going to say, make a thesis of the male gaze slowly arcing towards the female gaze and redeeming itself. It so happened that as I moved on this journey, first it started with a funny layer of a family feud between an Anglo-Indian family called the Josephs and the DaCosta family. So there's a family feud. And there's a revenge that is sought by the matriarch, Rita DaCosta. Now it starts with that. But slowly you start discovering that Rita DaCosta is a different person. She's 67 when the book begins, actually in present times. So her feminism or her internalized patriarchy is very different from Annette's. And so will Apollina be different because of the spectrum on which she might find herself. And so will Blanca be, because if it depends on the whole hierarchy and the system in a family, if you are an invisible member, man or woman, you would have a different reaction on growth and arc of how you become visible. If at all we go by simple story outlines, we don't have to. You could leave them invisible also. You could say that this character didn't move. Or you could say no, they had a deep inner transformation where they were invisible and then they had these experiences and there they come out into their own. Usually that's more satisfying, not just for a reader but for a human being, because I think somewhere we always seek metamorphosis. We always seek transformation, rags to riches stories, the underdog. So Blanca is the underdog. She happens to be a woman, so the story follows her as a woman, the second daughter-in-law who's invisible. Apollina because of her LGBTQ spectrum, but interestingly, a person who is not yet realized as a gay. She hasn't realized gayness in her. She's still somewhere caught in the quagmire of marriage. What is expected of me, even though I rebel crazily. I wear my husband's clothes. I'll wear my brother's clothes. And Annette. Now, Annette uses her sexuality. Because again, there was so much to explore about different women and how they will pick through the palette of freedom and agency, and how will they fight back or voice. And everyone will choose a different thing. And Annette chooses her sexuality, but not all the time. She also uses her mind when she comes into power.
I mean, she also uses her sexuality when it serves her purpose.
Yes, and not when it doesn't, not all the time.
Yes.
Even though she can.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see this, but I also looked at the men. Like the men also suffer from patriarchy. Like what about our darling Father Fabian Furtado? Now he loves God, and he's in this triangulate relationship between woman, God, and himself, and stuck in a marriage that he doesn't want. And so that is also a kind of different kind of I don't know whether it's a religious patriarchy of sorts, that people ask him, what's so big about you loving God? Even we love God. So what's so great about it? Like, continue with your marriage. We all love God. So how does he answer that? Yeah. So this is patriarchy, yes, but this is also all those kinds of enforced structures that are there for men and women. And the women here, of course, suffer more because, kitchen politics and den politics. So you have the men in the den, but you have the women in the kitchen. And even the masala has politics. And even the cutlets have politics as to which food or which cuisine is cooked. Is it the Anglo-Indian cuisine or the Goan cuisine? So I had that. Of course, there was one fallout of that. There was a reader who spoke at NCPA and said, I was so hungry after reading this book. And I was like, why? And she said, because you mentioned the recipes. And I'm like, what? But people take what they want.
Exactly. Since you very eloquently described Father Fabian, and you have so many characters in the book, who is your favorite character of the book?
Oh my God, if I say this, it's Jason DaCosta. And Jason is a side character, by the way. But you know Jason DaCosta. So Jason, because I think somewhere I love the thought of death without it being suicidal. I love the fact that one day you can close the book on your life. Right? One day it ends. There's affinity to it. There's affinity to life. Jason loves death. So basically Jason loves death. Pedro loves life. both are brothers. And interestingly, both have inherited land, because this is about land and gold and greed. But one person wants, to create capitalism and more riches, maybe corruption, through land. So therefore buildings and all those kinds of things. And one person has his loveliest graveyard. It's the most beautiful graveyard you've ever seen. Okay, and Jason tends to that graveyard, and he has these lovely tombstones and, the grass, and it's so beautiful. And he loves the dead. And when Gaitonde comes to interrogate, he would talk about how the souls leave, and, how we are 1% dead when we are just born, and we are 1% alive when we are nearly dying. And he talks of these crazy, nonsensical, sensical things. And I was like, hey, from where is this coming? I was like, no, this is my fascination with the finity of life and death. And Jason, and he became a side character. Once, like when, I don't know how many of you are artists here, we talk to our muses and entities, right? And so I was like, Jason, I could give you more footage. Why are you just a side character? Tell me if you want to be something more. And Jason was like, no, I'm so happy to be near death and dying. Please don't give me too much. Give the other characters. And I'm like, okay.
It's interesting that you mentioned Jason as your favorite character, because I had a
whose is yours?
I'll answer that, but I had an interesting question about Jason a little later.
Okay.
But since you asked me a question about who my favorite character is, I think I really like Paulina.
Paulina.
Yeah, okay. Largely because of her evolution and how she fights the male patriarchy in terms of completely unfathomable mannerisms that she portrays, including wearing her ex-husband's clothes, including wearing her brother's clothes. Although the LGBTQ angle wasn't very obvious to me, I just thought it was a means of her protest, not necessarily
because it is not obvious to her as
not as a gender slash sexuality insecurity in any manner, but how she also becomes very physical in terms of how she takes on the thugs and everybody around, which doesn't seem
she loves to bash.
And it doesn't seem very typical of a woman character that would perhaps take to do that. So therefore, I personally like that evolution. But before I ask you the specific question on Jason, I had another question on the book itself. So the book has lots of circles of things happening. It's like a whirlpool of things happening, right? And I was curious to know, was this whirlpool of the evolution of the character and the book itself very evident to you as a writer right up front, or did it all evolve as part of the writing? Because I'm just imagining that if it evolved as part of the writing, how do you keep going back and making sure that what you've already processed is in line with what you're processing now because of new evidence that you found with the characters, or perhaps Jason has spoken with you and therefore you want to change how he has evolved.
This actually takes me to another answer actually, and it's not limited. It's as unlimited as your question, because I was also writing the screenplay for this, and because of that, it allowed me some discipline, because when you have too many characters in a story world and they have their little arcs, it's too difficult to keep track. It's like how many strings can you really pull together? So because I had the script as well, and script or screenwriting disciplines you because it is very finite. 110 pages, that's it, because it's about production, money. Of course, you can have a little bit more pages in a book. You can meander. You can talk of the swaying of the coconut trees. You can't do that with a script. It has to be barn, dot, next thing, right? I will say it's very disciplined. So I think I was also developing the script simultaneously, so that became a kind of an outline for me, because of course I have gone mad writing the novel because I unleashed myself here, unlike the script which is reined in, but it did provide some bit of structure of how I'm telling the story. I'm jumping from the 1960s to the 1990s, Callian, and 1960s is just the preface, but I could see that because of doing both things, and I must say the script was out first. So the script of the DaCosta family was out in 2023 at the NFDC Film Bazaar. It was one of the top book to box office kind of scripts. And I remember in Goa, and I felt very surreal, because I was not at the Goa Arts and Literature Festival. I was not here at Carpe Diem, but I was in NFDC Film Bazaar, Marriott. So I was feeling like, okay, this is a different place. I'm like, you're more used to the literature festivals. But I was pitching DaCosta there. And I remember some of the local people who were working, the staff, they all ran and came and sat. And they were like, like, we want this, we want this, we want this. But it was a script. And it's still evolving because I think this might become a film.
Well, that's fantastic news. I hope it does.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And I invite all of you to be part of this in whichever way you wish. Maybe actors, maybe singers, I don't know. Anything that you wish. Any of your skills. Because it's going to be a very independent film with very shoestring budget and with a lot of crowdsourced love, maybe.
Not money?
Money, shoestring. So because always this thing happens, right? The question on ROI. If it's a Konkani film, if it's a Konkani and English film, then what's the ROI? That's the first thing producers ask you. And that's how they kind of close a conversation. If this was somebody even said that in the bazaar, can we make this a Punjabi film? I was like, no, it's a Goan film. Or it's a story of Goans.
You probably would have got a lot more money then.
Yeah, but then it wouldn't be Rita DaCosta, right? You would have Rita Oberoi or I don't know what.
Rita Oberoi.
Rita Kapoor. No, so I was like, no. So I'm like, give me the shoestring budget, will do. But let the characters be who they were originally. I don't mind moving them from Kalyan to Goa, but that's the max. Don't change their, like the whole community, because then you lose out everything Goan. And how many times do you want to see parathas instead of, say, sannas on the table? Let's start with that. Yeah, so, if this is made, it's going to be Goan English and Konkani.
Excellent. And really hope it does become a film.
Yes, just pray for me.
Punjabi character in there.
Sorry?
Actor?
One Punjabi actor.
Oh, come on. Come.
Yeah, you got one actor already for your film.
And you can play Goan also.
Before we continue, would you like to read us a piece from the book?
So now I just picked the one that you did Farmaish of. Okay?
I don't know. It's your Farmaish.
No, come on. Apollina, right? You're hung on Apollina. Okay, so this one. So here there is actually, the context of the story is that they're waiting for a re-election to happen of the Don. So I must say this, that from where does Don Pedro come about? So this is just an inflated sense of self that Don Pedro thinks that he is the Portuguese mafia. Okay, and actually he may be a Galifa Gunda, who knows, but he thinks he's the mafia. So when Theodore DaCosta passes away, they're going to have a re-election of the Don. So now Rita wants Jason DaCosta, her second son, to be Don, and Pedro doesn't think that Jason would be suitable because he's with his graveyards and his dead bodies and his souls, right? Where is he going to come into the world of the living? So this is somewhere from there. So Rita made a mental map of all the things Jason could look into and mark them on a neat notebook page along with their locations in the market square. So basically she's trying to convince all people to vote for Jason, the tenants included. So she's creating her little clues. But it was Apollina who actually sorted out the problems created by their corrupt associates. The associates are Bubisha Singh, Gasraj, Subhash Mutre, Khamba Khali, Gubbara, Chuze Chamkile, and Chaman Jinga. Apollina was not made for the kitchen. In fact, Apollina was not made to be a woman, not in the traditional sense of womanhood, and yet she was female. Sometimes a femme, sometimes femme fatale. Masculinity was awake in her body by an equal measure of testosterone with estrogen because of a severe case of polycystic ovaries. Her moustache and beard she waxed. Her pubic hair, armpit hair, and thick hair on her nipples she didn't. Apollina decided to tackle the problem one kick at a time, now that the men were so busy with real estate and other deals. It gave her a sense of purpose, sometimes to live and look forward to. For the alcohol business contaminated with overripe grapefruit juice and pulp, she got made a kacha cement water pool and got the 4 bodyguards to empty all the spurious alcohol into it. Then she nabbed each miscreant by the collar, beat them up, bashed them and dragged them to the pool and dunked their heads until they grappled for heaven or were so high, nearly drunk and dead. She left them with a warning as juice mixed with blood dribbling from their noses. For Baba Joe's cave, which is a casino, a small casino, she dressed in a tight-fitting red dress from Annette's cupboard and let her ample cleavage show. She painted her face in heavy makeup as if wearing a mask under her Goldilocks wig. She waited and watched all who had the courage in their balls to gain the stations and slip away through the cracks in the doors. She asked her men to close the doors and announced that only one would be open from now on for entries and exits. That's how she caught each thief with his loot. She raised the taxes on the lazy extortionists who had stopped extracting hafta from the wine shops and gold showrooms that the DeCostas had given protection to. The trickle-down effect was felt in the shuddering spines of the extortionists as they learned how to extort well enough. Rita followed Apollina's plans to the twins and made sure Jason appeared there every time a knot was settled, bearing a large smile on his face, in a bow and tie and 3-piece suit, getting a photo clicked by a hired photographer. Yeah, I'll stop here actually. She counted on her fingertips, that is Rita counted on her fingertips, the tenants who were in her pocket. Besides Jason himself, Annette, Blanca, Maggie, Seneca and Myland. Myland is mispronounced for Millen. Myland. The one she would never win over, even if she gave all her wealth away to, was Vaswani. She had no idea what was on Apollina's mind either. She had chided her over her divorce, her unladylike ways, and now this girl had shut herself up. Maggie, who's the 8-year-old granddaughter of the house, had a vote too, and Rita wondered how to bribe her, with chocolates, or a new dress from Premsons or Amarsons, or take her gold shopping to Chira Bazaar, or buy her a fine dress material from Crawford Market or Manish Market. Just then, the girl stumbled into the library of secrets.
Thank you so much. And you've read probably 2 pages, and every page is as colorful as the 2 pages you've read. I have 2 very specific questions on some of the characters in the book. One is on Jason itself, and I'm wondering how to ask it without revealing too much about how the book actually evolves. But he seems to be a little sympathetic towards Rita's grandeur plans of how she wants.
I like the way you masked this.
Yeah, because as I said, I don't want to give away a lot of the book to the audience.
He's done well.
And since you did say that you wanted to perhaps give him a lot more space in your book, I was just wondering, why is he so sympathetic towards Rita's plans, which is completely in opposition to every other member in the family, right?
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
it seems like he's the only one who's standing with her in a virtual manner for her plans to succeed.
Yeah, in a way that you say that Seneca doesn't know what Seneca is a modern day Delulu, who's in her own erotic world, if I may say, and just to marry Milland or Myland, as they call him. But Apollina has her own, place. Jason, because of Pedro, he doesn't like Pedro.
Oh, as simple as that. Okay.
Very complex also.
Very complex too.
Very
Yeah.
complex
Okay.
also.
Because I was curious as to why is he so sympathetic, and now that you say it, it probably makes it clear to me too.
Yeah.
And another very specific question on Annette, right? At some point when she is standing to become the MLA of that region, the tenants come and sign their agreement very willingly when she asks them, and all that time they were completely unwilling to sign it. Why suddenly are they so willing when she asks them?
That's interesting, Cop. But actually, it's like only Andrew Rodericks is the tenant with all the Marxism in him, who's they like this question too. So I think only Andrew actually is against the signing of the redevelopment agreement. Actually, the other tenants have more or less, they're subservient enough to sign it. What happens more than that is when Annette, when anyone sits in a position of, let's say, suggestion or solution, they are the giver and you're the receiver because you go to consult. There's always that power dynamics that I come with a problem and you have a solution, so you're bigger than me. And I'm going to trust you now. So they trust Annette that, okay, they come with some problems. Like, let's say somebody wants to have an interreligious marriage, the child. So now Annette is going to tell them whether to go ahead with that or not. Someone has failed their, their college. So should they do polytechnic, whatever. So she's meting out solutions which earlier only this Sabha was handled by Don Pedro. Now she's handling the Sabha. So naturally, they find it hypnotic that she's giving them attention. See, that's what happens with power dynamics. Power dynamics seeks approval. Class dynamics seek validation. So when a solution is meted out, it's validation that you saw me and my problem. I'll sign this off. But they were anyway subservient. Most of the tenants, what you call being cooperative. It was Andrew Rodericks who's the bone of contention.
So since you mentioned this power dynamics, it's very evident, especially in Annette, when she is standing for elections, she kind of doesn't have time for her lover.
Yeah.
But when her lover chooses to stand suddenly and wins, she has all the time for him. So it's very evident. So it's very evident in terms of the power dynamics that you want to extract there.
See, Gavin DeMonte, who's her lover, is portrayed as a brawny guy but bird-brained. Because there are people like that also, in both genders. Sometimes who are very, brilliant looking outside, and of course the definition of beauty is again questionable for me, but in a way, stereotypically. And they could be just very simple inside. They don't even have the weight of their beauty with them. They're that simple. And Gavin, though, is a very confused, this inside-out coconut. Because he is an Anglo-Indian who is supposed to bash the heroes who are a little shade darker than him, okay? Let's have it. But he is the Bollywood villain or the bashing them up and then getting bashed. But he's blue-eyed.
Pigment politics.
Exactly, pigment politics, yes. And at the same time, he's very simple in love. He just loves her and there's no arc. He loves her in the beginning, he loves her in the middle, he loves her in the end. It's she who goes through all the complexities and mind games and till she redeems and
So curious to know, since you did specifically mention about Jason and you thought in retrospect that he could perhaps have had more space, were there any other characters that you think in retrospect that you would have changed, edited, evolved differently?
See, now when I'm working on the film script, naturally it's going through a different lens, right? Because what I wrote as a writer's version of the script and the book was completely mine. Now, naturally, a new person coming in will have some different idea and all. Let's say the producer coming in will have another, viewpoint. But none of them wanted to change the core of anything. The questions were all, the easier ones, which are quick to fix, small things. Like, because this is an ensemble character, some side characters missing. It ends with Seneca's wedding, so some side character has gone missing. So they'll be like, where is that side character? I'm like, I missed that person. So small things like that, very interesting, enriched nuance. But no, generally speaking, I think even now I'm talking from 2023, this is 2026, and I'm already many other stories old. Right, my next book is The Fabric Goddesses of 3 women around the garment and fashion industry from Bangladesh to New York to Bangalore. So I moved in my head. I'm still here sitting in one place, but I've moved in my head to Global South and Global North fashion. And then I'm working on a thriller which actually got pitched today at the International Film Festival Delhi called Kunur Inn. And I wasn't there because I was here. I chose this. I was like, I'm going here. I'm not going to Delhi. So I sent somebody to pitch that. And it got pitched this morning. And so I'm many stories old, but when I still come back and think, is there anything else to fix? I find very little. So which is redeeming for a writer, because you're like, okay, either I didn't evolve much or the book didn't evolve much. We stopped. We're not evolving too much.
I have a couple of more questions, and then we'll perhaps have the audience ask a few questions. So against this milieu of the Anglo-Indian family and the Goan family, you have very stereotypical Gaitonde and Vaswani.
Yes.
I'm not going to say who they are and what they do in the book, but it seems very, very stereotypical in terms of the roles that they play, and of course in terms of how the character itself is built. Would you have anything to say to that?
Largely because I came from this Goan Catholic milieu, I wanted to keep this within that milieu. Okay, so Burgundy House is within the Goan Catholic milieu. So you will find the tenants also are Catholics for the sake of convenience. It's not like I didn't want to include too many people, but I would completely dilute everything then. If you become inclusive at the wrong time by having your story world in a Belpuri. But then you do have some other people who are outside, because you can't have everything, and no one is going to believe that even there's an Inspector Pinto now. And then they'll be like, oh, that's too much of Catholic. So then to keep it a little real, in Kalyan, you do have Maharashtrians, you do have Sindhis, because Ulhasnagar is not too far from Kalyan. So you had to have a Vaswani, because he's connected to the politicians there. You had to have Gaitonde because he's Marathi. So you had to have house help from Bihar and Jharkhand, because they came and they still come from that side. And you do have them. So there were other characters around the Catholic milieu.
Yeah. So the last question, I think you already answered. I wanted to ask you of the latest book that you released, but you did briefly mention it. Perhaps you may want to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah.
But before we ask the audience if they have any questions that they would like to ask, if I may make a request to you, would you mind reciting a poem for all of us?
I have to dig it now. See, that's the surprise he kept. And that's a shock, because I have to dig now. Okay, so
I'm sure you should be able to find something.
Yeah, let's hope. Okay. So this story, because it was inside me, and it was like, many stories you need to do some character work, right? You would know that. What's your name, please?
Niharika.
Yeah. So you'd have to do some character work, they say, right? Because you need to understand psychography, sociography, age, mannerisms. Here you didn't need to do that, because you're lifting off, families that you know for so long, maybe neighbors you knew for so long, so they're inside you. No, you're not going to use them as they are. You're going to change something, you're going to make it this thing, but it's already there. The character work is already done. So that part was solved. So I generally not a slow writer. I think fast, I execute fast, and I'm not boasting by any, I'm just being observant.
Like 500 words a day kind of.
No, 2,000 words a day.
Wow.
Yeah. But not like some people do 10,000 words a day, not like that also. 2,000 words a day, one chapter is my kind of thing. I can finish that. People do 10,000. So 2,000 is good for me, especially in the mornings. That's the best time when I can write, and then I do the other editing, submitting, pitching to scripts, because I'm also a script writer, so I pitch a lot. So that's what. So it didn't take a long time, because characters were already there. But even if it's a new story world, it doesn't take me very long. So you could say overall a year between inception, ideation, execution, full first draft would be a year. Aram se, because I don't, put a lot of pressure. Sometimes I'm traveling, then there's a little bit of a gap, then you come again and read what you wrote. So I just allow that. Earlier I was a little more disciplined, and I thought a little bit harsher and harder on myself. But then I started relaxing, because I don't think people read as fast as you want to write. So why not just chill? Yeah, so I started chilling much more, and you find your own rhythm. That's another thing. Sometimes I like to write a lot because that's my rhythm. Sometimes I like to slow down and not do anything because that's the rhythm. So as you would know, that's how we role.
Lovely, thank you.
Thanks.
So has this new book taken you longer, since there's some amount of unfamiliarity with both the characters as well as the setting?
Yes, I had to go to Dhaka. I had to check out the sweatshops. I don't need to say the check out in that way, but I had to actually go there and, people didn't want to entertain us because they thought we were journalists and we would write something bad about the sweatshops. I didn't write bad, but I have not glorified the women who have invisible labor to hold half the sky up for global supply, right? I mean, neither am I glorifying it, neither am I completely putting it into the mud. But I had to go to Dhaka. I went to Davangere, Bangalore. Now Davangere is just in India, but it's so nice to see the sky. And it's so different from Bangalore because it's like just a dome of sky. So wherever you see the prose, it's actually authentic because I actually was recording and saying, I can see the whole dome of sky. Because then that's the authentic thing. The characters came from imagination and maybe a little bit of interviewing or looking, watching and all, but a lot of it was imagination. I think all three women are largely, I don't know them, but I know them to the end. And I rely on my readers. They say they felt connected to these raw characters. So then I'm like, okay, it hit home then. Because they are not real. They are fictionalized. And what else? I think the emotions of them I felt. Like I felt when Bailey, she went through this day and night in a sweatshop where you have a little window in which you see time. So time is by the color of light. Yeah, so time is a certain ochre, orange, jasmine, burgundy, indigo. So you see time as you're still stitching. So that emotion I can feel because I think we all set out somewhere, right? We work in drudgery. So those things I could feel. That is, how do you say, in a way, in their shoes, kind of.
So since you mentioned these three women characters in your new book, writing about strong women characters, is that something consciously that you do, or does it just happen naturally?
No, I think the stories on men somehow are over. Because I'm not saying that.
That's funny.
I'm not saying. I've read so many male stories and stories about men that I want to discover something new about men or male characters. Then I'll write about them, definitely. But otherwise, I feel because a lot of male authors have told male stories through the centuries, through the years. What has been happening? Even now in the film industry, largely you're telling male stories, right? I mean, the feminine side is in a corner. It's being pushed to a corner all the time because of business. They say that not a lot of ROI happens, right? That's a common thing. You find some great stars say that women, that I don't know whether we will get to work, whether we'll get to tell our stories or not. Big, like a film like Assi. Actresses have said, right? We don't know whether another story like this can be told. But a Dhurandhar you will not, right? I mean, it's high on testosterone and whatnot. So there is a little big skew rather of male stories. So sometimes I feel what you naturally are curious enough as a writer, poet, to look at what is not told. So you want to tell stories which are not told. And there are a lot of female stories that are not told. You don't know how a woman feels. Where does she feel the burden of living? What is the emotional cost of taking care of a family? How does she feel in the most minutiae of places? We don't know that yet. We are still discovering women. We have seen the men, but I'm not saying we have all the male stories covered. If I find something new about a man, I'm sure to write it. Like I remember this short story called The Arithmetic of Breasts. It was told from the male gaze of a man who lusts after a woman's breast and marries her. And it is I'm in the head of that man. And I'm in the head of the man because it starts with a trigger of street harassment and why is women bodies always touched and molested. But it turned comical. It turned into this black comedy of, okay, what if this guy, which is all my male friends who ever said, breast. I'm like, okay, let's take them. Let's make an alchemy of them. This is the character Naren and he loves this woman's breasts. Let's start with that bang on and let me explore.
Interesting concept.
Yeah, and actually speaking, it worked. because it was not a thesis of lust at all. It was a saga of marriage. It was what happens after lust, what happens beyond a woman's body, what happens in a relationship between man and woman as they age, as they bald, as they pot belly, as they grow sick, old. Then comes the love and all. So you go through that whole thing. But I started with male gaze, blatantly, and I was like, let's have fun with this, because I've never been so blatant as a male character. I was so blatant that once a male reader said, we don't think about breasts all the time. I'm like, bingo. You're the only one who said it. Yeah. I did it. And I had fun with that.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be an interesting read. But I had a question about your reference to the Bollywood industry. So does that feel intimidating at times in terms of being a woman voice and trying to have women's stories in a very, unfortunately, male-dominated industry and powerful men, saying what does work and does not work?
No, see, it's very intersectional. I'm still on the fringes making my networks because I come from poetry, literature, and then going to pitch. So even though it's 7 years since I've written 20 spec scripts and I'm pitching them everywhere, and maybe the DeCosta is the first one that will happen actually, but the others are close at heels, but it takes time to pitch for everyone to come on board because there's money involved, no? Crores of money, it's not like anything less. I didn't find too much as a female script writer, as much as I feel that every script writer generally goes through the harshness of an industry that keeps changing. So before you know it, it's a web series wave. Before you know it, it's a microdrama wave. Before you know it, it's a mini series. Then it's something else. So then it's a genre. Then it's horror comedy. Then before it's horror comedy, it's male-driven testosterone. You don't know what it can get into before you meet another person. So I don't think as a female scriptwriter I did face a challenge. I think as a screenwriter or as an artist in the film industry, you face a very changing industry that you cannot make very much sense of. And that's what you face. And you also face a very large ocean. Oh, he's the timekeeper? Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
5 minutes. Yeah. Okay, that is
I think you were sent by Sonia Fernandes.
Very well trained. Yeah. So, wow, that's 10 minutes. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. So that's, I think that. But only once I remember I'd gone with a very strong female sexuality protagonist called the Gulmohar in Bloom, and that's one odd director said, "Oh, if you've written on strong female sexuality, definitely you have a strong sexual desire, and come give me a hug." And I'm like, no, my script is on the table, not me. There was once, but that could have happened anywhere. The moment a woman writes in strong female sexuality, it's assumed you are asking for it. And like, who was a comedian who said, if she needed to ask for it, she would ask for it. You didn't have to have a script to ask for it through a character. So that was the only one stray odd thing, and I just walked out from there because it was bizarre, and I ghosted the person. But other than that, I don't think as a female scriptwriter I faced things. I did face a time when Muslim protagonists, I had one feature length on a survival drama of a Muslim, exploring Islamophobia in the West and in India. That didn't go for the longest time, and it still isn't picked up for the longest time. They say change her to a Hindu, and I'm like, I'm talking about Islamophobia, how can I make it, I don't know what, Hinduphobia, whatever. I can't do that. That script didn't go, and but I didn't change anything, it's there. And other than that, no, the genres. It's not the gender, it's the genres. Thriller. Everyone loves a good thriller, they love a good horror thriller, comedy, they love comedy. So this book, suddenly got very liked and all that. So the genres, people go after genres. So drama these days, I heard, doesn't always sell. You need a mixed genre. Drama plus something. Yeah. So
this book has everything.
Do you find it, how do you balance the two? I mean, I'm midway through reading it.
Yeah.
It's dark comedy and very emotionally intense at some points. Okay. So do you write and do you come back saying that, okay, this is too dark here, it's too emotional here? Do you change it at any point?
No,
How
I
do you
did.
find the balance basically?
No, actually, so I'm happy that you saw the darkness as well, because that's kind of hidden with the, like a bibinka, like under the layers of fun. But no, I don't change. I'm very merciless that way. Very merciless. If it has to be dark, let it be. And if it has to be brutal, let it be. And of course, if it disturbs me very much, no. But I don't think these two books disturb me to that level. But I won't shy away from any of the feelings. I let it be. Because it's mostly the characters, right? Yeah.
Good you said that. I mean, did any of the characters surprise you at any point as you were?
All of them.
Did you have like an idea for them, and then at some point
See, I have a starting idea of them. Like I would have a starting idea of the Dicosses, of course, started with my family and then moved to become something else. But of Adarshini, Geeta and Bailey, I had no idea, but I have a starting idea. She's a seamstress. She's going to go through sweatshop drudgery because the court has to go through that process. So you will meet on the milestone, you're going to meet, the court is going to meet Bailey. But I will discover their journeys. I cannot, even if I try to say, you do this, they fight with me. I mean, you may think I'm mad, but if you're an artist, you believe that these people, these entities fight with you and say, I'm not going to do this. This is not me. I'll tell you who I am, come next time. And you close the file and you keep it away, and then it comes back and says, come now, I'll tell you. And if it reveals something and you'll be like, oh, that day you're euphoric. Because it's revealed something so different and you're like, okay, this is what you are, let's follow you. And I follow the characters. I follow. That way I have to not do work. Which is your favorite character so far?
So the thing is, which I'll be very honest with you, when I first started reading it, and there was lots of times that Rita really bugged me, as a character. I was so annoyed with her, like, why are you like this? And then I said, I took a minute, I went back to the start, and I realized, okay, this is what happened, and I don't know how it's going to end, but there is a small part, okay, this is what is going to happen because she wants to get revenge. Yes. So I think now I would say she's my favorite character.
No, but I'm happy even if she bugs you, because that's also a job done. A job done. The character should not always be likable. They should stick with you. Thank you. Yes.
Any other questions? Sorry, she had a question. Mike.
Second.
I haven't read your book.
Okay.
You should pick it up.
I shall. You've sold it well.
Wow.
Actually, on that note, the question I had was, so I personally, when I write, I'm actually unable, for some reason, just reservoirs of my energy just run out to talk about the work. For you, with your character, I can tell that you love to both write and talk about what you write.
Yeah.
Which is more exhausting, you find?
Neither. I have learned to talk of the story behind the story, because there was a time I was only a storyteller, like a story writer.
Right.
But I call it storyteller. And I was not a story seller. But after going to enough of panel discussions, you learn that people zoom out and they can contextualize their work. And the ones who do that well, they give more context to more canvas to their art. Because you're zooming out and you're telling me something more than just the story. You're telling me the story behind the story. I put it simply that way. Of course, you could say it any which ways. And then I was like, this is an interesting skill. To contextualize that, to frame it. And I had to pick that skill up along the way through different panel discussions and literature festivals. And it took me time to pick it up. So I didn't become a story seller, if you say I've sold it, easily. I had to understand how to dissociate from the story. So you dissociate by being the writer, by the observer, the social commentator. You're not only, in the canvas of that. But it's a skill that I picked from.
Not a part of your personality per se, which it's not on your default position.
No, not my default position. It's a skill I picked up on the way, because I saw that there were these very wonderful writers and poets who could sell their work, like contextualize their work. Whether the book sold or not is something else. But they could on stage contextualize it. Say where it came from, like what was an anecdote, something good, something bad. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. You need to be more than just the storyteller on page. You need to keep telling stories around it and around it and around it. And that's a skill, it's a very exhaustive skill. But then it becomes interesting after a while. After a while, it's enjoyable. So now it's enjoyable. But oh God, at one point, I couldn't say anything. I was like, isn't that the book reviewer's job? Exactly. Why do I have to do this?
That's exactly why I'm asking.
Yeah, I'm like, why do I have to do this? But no.
And did you have sorry, I'm asking another question on that.
Yeah.
Did you have an okayish time with the publishing side of things in the very first time when you published?
See, I've had a better...
Has your experience shifted or changed?
See, generally publishing experiences for me, or I don't know about the others, I'm just talking about myself, but it may be the same for others. It's not ever been easy because publishers keep changing with every book. So all my poetry books got published by different publishers, and the last one got published by Hachette, Big Five. Okay, and it sold well. Then when I went with the novels, they were like, no, what they didn't say it out loud is they found, everybody in the publishing world found that, oh, you're coming from poetry, so you would only probably sell this much, and you're not a novelist per se, so how much of the sales, is always that, right? It's always bottom line sales. So I chose to go with a small press because I don't want the totem pole of big to small publishers to decide my fate as a writer. I want to just write the next story. That's what I had my allegiances to the muse and not the market. Yeah, so I'm like, go to hell. Who's publishing? Come, and I'm going to write the next one and the next one. It's Big Five, it's small press, doesn't matter. So I've done away with that, and I'm telling you, it's liberating. It's very liberating.
That's very brave.
Yeah, because how long do you get puppeted by all this? Like, it's very tiring. It's more tiring than telling the story of the story. Yeah, story of the story is better.
I think we have one more question.
Just one question. Being, just out of curiosity, being a script writer, do you like watch Konkani movies yourself? Do you normally watch Konkani movies?
So I just watched I Saiba sometime
Yes,
back.
and what's your...
I enjoyed it like crazy. Crazy. It was a popcorn movie. I enjoyed it. And I enjoyed the fact that the actors, I know how many of you have seen I Saiba? Okay, only one person. Two. Yes. So I like the fact that the actors after that stood outside the auditorium and they met with the audience and they think about marketing. I mean, I've not seen many heroes and actors wait outside patiently after the show. They click pictures, they said tag us and all that, and they did it with great verve. That's again story behind the story. I mean, I've not seen many of that, but yeah. So I liked it for both.